The Gospel of Mark has some unique characteristics. One is that it is written in a more terse fashion. It doesn't flesh out a lot of information as the other Gospel writers do. And he also, when he opens up his Gospel, he goes directly to Jesus' ministry. He doesn't provide any kind of a context or background and birth narratives and all of that, but jumps right into what Jesus' mission here on earth was, which was teaching and healing. Now there seem to be two strong characteristics in what the opening passages have to say in the Gospel of Mark. One is that Jesus taught with authority, and people were amazed that this untrained individual could walk into a synagogue and seem to have a greater knowledge of Scripture than the priests did. He had a certain power and aura about himself that caused people to sit up and pay attention. They noticed the power of what he had to say. There was a great deal of authority in his teaching, and he projected that as he conducted himself in the temple and then throughout his ministry. The second aspect of what we read in this passage is that he had the power to heal. He had the power to take people who were untreatable, it seemed, and cure them. Now, are the two related? The power of his personality, the power of his being, the power of his bearing, and the ability to heal? Well, maybe. Maybe that power of his personality was responsible for the fact that he could take incurable people and reach them and cure them. Now, the gospel reads that he was confronted in the synagogue by someone with an unclean spirit. Some versions say evil spirit. And what did your version say? What was that word they used? Afflicted spirit. What does that mean? What was wrong with this guy? We don't know, but certainly something had him, he was a little disturbed. If he had an unclean spirit, you could assume maybe he would go into the temple and he'd curse a lot, or he had a bad attitude. We've encountered people with that kind of unclean spirit. Maybe he was selfish and greedy, just didn't treat people well. But if he had an evil spirit, it seemed that it's assumed that this person might have been possessed by an outside being. Perhaps Satan had possessed his spirit. And perhaps that's what was driven out by Jesus. Afflicted spirit, again, it's someone who just didn't seem to have it all together and was noticeable to people. They could tell that there was something wrong with this guy. He impacted people when he encountered them. They knew it and that he needed some help. Jesus, through the power of his being, somehow reached into this man and was able to bring that unclean spirit out of him. That was the strength of his ministry, is being able to reach people that way who others couldn't help. He was able to reach into them and take that part that was unclean, that was causing problems with his relationships, and be able to cure that through the power of his being. Now, we don't necessarily have that power. I don't. I'm not one that is especially comes across as being authoritative, someone who has the power of a personality to cause people to change when I meet them. I don't have that ability. We know people that do. Norman Vincent Peale, with his power of positive thinking, seemed to have impacted a lot of people. That's thinking positively, has a curative kind of aspect to it. We have Tony Robbins with his positivist message. We have Billy Graham with his message of salvation that seems to have impact on people, mostly in large part because he spoke with authority. People could listen to him and they believed what he was saying, and he had an effect on people that most of us who stand up here and preach don't. We just don't have that ability, that kind of a power. We don't speak with that kind of authority. But Jesus apparently did. And when he was in contact with people who had some kind of an illness, somehow there was something in his being that caused people to think differently, perhaps affected their body, and brought along he had some kind of a curative power in being able to do that. Jesus had that. Now, perhaps this person was afflicted with a mental illness. Maybe that's, in modern terms, that's what we would call it. Perhaps that's just what he had. Now, we can't cure mental illness. That's a serious problem with people. If you have schizophrenia, you can't talk people down from that, the power of your personality. It takes someone with trained medical skills and some medicines to do that. Now, how common was mental illness back in that day? Well, it's pretty common today, so we can translate perhaps back a couple of thousand years. Here are some statistics about mental illness in the U.S. from 2017 from the National Alliance on Mental Health. Approximately 1 in 5 American adults experience mental illness in any given year. 1 in 5. That's a lot. 1 in 20 experience limited function as a result of their mental illness. Just over 1% of adults live with schizophrenia, which is a major, major mental illness. 2.5% of adults live with bipolar disorder, which again is a debilitating mental illness as well. So there is quite a bit here in this country that I can't cure it, Billy Graham can't cure it, Norman Vincent Peale with his power of positive feeling, power of positive thinking couldn't cure, I'm fairly certain, schizophrenia. Just by trying to encourage people to think positively about their lives, because there's a chemical imbalance in the brain that causes mental illness, and so it needs to have pharmacological treatment of some kind with a professional. Can we provide the kind of healing that we have been commissioned to do as followers of Jesus? Go out and preach the gospel, is what he told his disciples, and heal the sick. Well, I think I can do the first. I don't know how to do the second, necessarily. Do I have the power to cure people of the flu, for example, or some other major malady, cancer, other issues that people deal with in their lives of ill health? I don't have the power to do that. So what was Jesus telling us to do, and how can we follow through as disciples on healing? How can we do that? Well, I think we can, because there's another aspect of health that we pay less attention to. When we get sick, we go to the doctor. When we have the flu or some other malady of that nature, we can go to the doctor, be treated, and most often be cured. But there's another malady in Western nations that medicine can't cure, but that we have the curative powers to intervene. And that is our spiritual health. That's something we can affect. I think we can say with some positive assurity that Western nations are impoverished spiritually because of our obsession with wealth, with fame, with power, and with all the other maladies that come with being a Western society that has everything available to us, we can't resist it. We have this sickness within us that we have to have it if we see it. If the opportunity is there for us to gain it, we go for it instead of denying ourselves, as we are taught to do in the Gospels, denying ourselves of all of this. We lack spiritual health. And that is a healing that I have the ability to participate in. And so do each of you out there. We all have that ability. When we see someone or someone in a situation that is in poor spiritual health, we can provide some guidance. We can intervene. We can practice. We don't need a license to do that. We don't have to have special training. But through the power of our caring and our being and being grounded in the gospel, we have the power to help people beyond that. Now, what is spiritual health? How can we define that? We can say that spiritual health means having compassion, the capacity for love and forgiveness, to have altruism, joy, and fulfillment. Spiritual health can be defined by religious faith, values, beliefs, principles, and morals. Spiritual health. We have everything that we need in this country. It's available to us, but we lack that part of our being. We don't have spiritual health. In fact, all of this that we have and can enjoy, I think, causes spiritual illness, a weakness. There's something in us that when we grasp for all those things that we wish rather than what we need, that is a sign of being spiritually unhealthy. And we have the power within us, as Jesus commissioned us to do, to go out and heal the sick. We can do so as a congregation, or we have been empowered to do so individually. We recognize when people are spiritually impoverished, when there's need spiritual nourishment. And we have the power, again, to go out and do something about it. There's a Chinese proverb that says that if you wish to have a year of prosperity, grow grain. If you wish to have several decades of prosperity, grow trees. If you wish to have unlimited prosperity, grow people. Think about that. Grow people. Help people grow in their spiritual health. And we will have prosperity, spiritual prosperity, a prosperity that we don't know here in Western nations. We can do that. We have the power to do that, to help people grow in their spiritual health. That's something we can do. Jesus has commissioned us to do it. We have the power to do it. Now, trying to encourage spiritual health, we have to begin with ourselves. And growing in spiritual health, treating spiritual health within ourselves is something that we are encouraged to do. In fact, this is one area of health in which we are encouraged to self-medicate. Now, I'm not talking about going down to get the recipe from the basement, which comes in a bottle, and take a sip of that now and again. That's not what I'm talking about. Self-medication means to engage in spiritual practices that help us to grow spiritually. There are people in this congregation who do that, who practice meditation, a daily life of prayer, who read motivational literature to help them to focus their lives on their spiritual well-being, and to get hints and clues on how to work with others to be better spiritually. There are people in this congregation that have a healthy spiritual life because they practice these disciplines. And I congratulate you and I admire you when you do that, because you are a healthy healer, someone who can heal through your knowledge of spiritual practices, to get over the hump of spiritual depression, of spiritual impoverishment, to be a part of healing this nation, this community, this congregation, with everyone that we meet. Those who have those disciplines have the power to be healers. You can heal a spiritual sickness. Now, I put together a short list of things that could help us develop and strengthen our spiritual health. This is just a list to help us focus on things within us that we can do as spiritual healers, as followers of Jesus, with the ability to heal this sickness by looking at these questions and helping us to understand who we are as healers. For example, who can we identify has been most instrumental in my personal spiritual development? Let's think about that. Who has been most influential in my personal spiritual development? From this person, what can I incorporate into myself from the power that this person has? The healthy spiritual life that this person has. How frequently in my adult life has my conscience provided clear guidance? Can we think of those instances? Can we recall when a newly discovered truth has overcome strongly held bias? Biases are so entrenched, but occasionally we stumble upon the truth that can overcome that. At any time recently, have I followed through on sincere forgiveness? Sincere forgiveness, not just the words. What is the frame of reference for my personal ethic? Is this reference point constant and fixed? Is it an anchor for us? How often do we remember to be thankful? Am I aware of anyone who has benefited from my spiritual health and growth? Do I have awareness of when my spiritual awakening has spurred me into action? That I've been motivated because of my spiritual awakening. And finally, am I aware of any area in my spiritual life that is still underdeveloped? I'm sure if you're like me, you can think of a number of issues like that, where our spiritual life is still underdeveloped. And I'll close with this from writer Eleanor Powell. What we are is God's gift to us. What we become is our gift to God.